listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk.
Number 361.
Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Station with me, your host, Bob Cartwright. It's the beginning of May 2013 as I record this, and in a few days I'll be joining 200 or so other backpackers for the RAB TGO Challenge, which is an organised event which runs in May of each year. It's basically a 2-week, 200-mile walk from the west coast to the east coast of Scotland to promote fellowship amongst backpackers. I've done it several times, and each time I've recorded a full series diary podcast. These can be found over on the Outdoor Station if you use the search feature. Just search for TGO Challenge. They contain usually a diary, an audio diary, and interviews with those also doing the challenge, along with people I speak to as I travel through the area. And they make good, entertaining, all-round listening. Now this year I'll be joining two buddies, Lee Wells and Tony Bow, who have featured on the Outdoor Station before. To be honest, they have organised everything, as I have been extremely busy, and incidentally there's a little more information about that at the end of this podcast. So all I have to do actually is turn up. So I'm looking forward to some good banter, some good times, some excellent walking and some serious mickey taking. Now, Rose isn't coming this year. She normally does the challenge with me. And so she decided to do the West Highland Way instead on her own, which she completed a couple of weeks ago. So this podcast is all about that particular walk. And the West Highland Way would be ideal for those who want something a little more challenging than day walks, but not as serious or hardcore as a 2-week TGO challenge. The West Highland Way is 96 miles or 153 kilometres long and links Milngavie in the south, in Glasgow, to Fort William. It runs from Scotland's largest city to the foot of its highest mountain, Ben Nevis, through Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park. Walkers are recommended to travel from south to north and are advised not to overestimate how far they can travel on a daily basis. But I think it's probably best if Rose picks up this detail and explains why she did the walk, how she did the walk, and how she felt about the actual terrain.
I wanted to do it to test myself, really, if all the skills I'd learnt when I've been out with you and with groups, if I could do on my own. I've only ever previously done sort of a weekend or a couple of nights camping on my own. And so I want to see if I could navigate a trail and survive on my own for a week.
And why particularly the West Highland Way of all the different national routes there are in the UK?
Well, it's one a lot of our customers have done, and a lot of people have said it's very beautiful. So I thought that it was a good place to start.
So tell our listeners then the sort of time of year and what the weather's been like, just so they can visualise, the conditions that you actually undertook this. Well,
I wanted to go in April. Originally, I was looking at the first week in May, but then I found at the top end of the West Highland Way they actually do a cross-motor scramble event, and I just didn't fancy having that noise when you're in a beautiful situation. So I sort of went into April, which is the earliest I've ever been walking up in Scotland, really. And as everyone knows, this is April 2013. It was a cold winter after a very wet year. So there was still quite a lot of snow about, but it was guaranteed pre-midge, which is always a good thing in Scotland on the west coast.
So it's pre-midge, and hopefully, well, it's all a case of fingers crossed, isn't it? The weather was turning from winter into a little bit more spring-like, but you always take your chances.
Scotland tends to be a month behind us here in the sunny Malvern Hills, so it was certainly cooler, and there was a lot more snow about than down here, obviously.
Now, people are advised when they do the West Highland Way to do south to north, to go south to north, and that's what you chose to do. So take us from Glasgow, from anybody who's arriving at Glasgow and perhaps wants to get to the start point of this particular walk. Is it fairly easy?
Very, very easy, actually. My train got into Glasgow Central and to the main station, and basically you just go downstairs to the suburban railway, and it's about 40 minutes journey out to Mogai. It's about a £3 fare and takes you straight to Mogai, which is really a suburb of Glasgow.
And did you sort of stay over at a bed and breakfast, or did you camp there, sort of thing, before you set out?
Yeah, because my train was, I'd travelled up from the Midlands and had various trains to get there. Actually got there about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, so it was a bit late, I thought, to set out. So I actually booked in a little B&B, and there's certainly plenty of little B&Bs and places to stay in Mogai. They're sort of cater for it, I think, really. And just popped out in the evening for something to eat, and landlady was very accommodating and said she gets a lot of people, for the West Highland Way, and looks forward to the season. And they've actually, as you come out of the railway station, there's a big thing saying, welcome to the start of the West Highland Way. But the citizens of Mogai have actually put an obelisk in the centre of the town, so you can walk into the town, and there's an official start as well. So, it's a nice place to take photos and say, I'm here.
Right. And talking about the trail and so on, you obviously had a map. Tell us about the map, and generally across the whole length of the 100 or so miles, was it fairly well waymarked?
Extremely well waymarked, actually. The girls bought me a Harvey's map for Christmas, which is brilliant because it's the whole journey is on one map. A lot of useful information, and it's a weatherproof map as well, which is great. It was very clear where to go. There was the times it became difficult was when you got to a settlement or something. Actually, on the trail, by and large, it was sensitively marked. So, for example, at the start of Rannoch Moor, there would be a symbol, and you start off, and you couldn't really go off. As soon as you realised that as long as you kept on the path, you were fine. If there was a branch off, you didn't take it unless there was a symbol for you to do it. Having the map was reassuring, I have to say, and there was, I did check it continuous basis just to see where I was and how I was progressing. But you could actually do it without a map.
Let's now break it down into the amount of days it took you to do it. You were obviously walking on your own. No doubt you'll tell us if you met people along the way. It's about 100 miles, and did you find it is an easy 100 miles?
There was a range of... I think one of the things about the West Highland Way is there's a range of scenery. You start off in suburbia, as it were, and walk out into the countryside. And I think the reason it's recommended south to north is that you start off gradual, and obviously as you go further north, you get into the mountains. So, it sort of acclimatises you as a walker, I guess, into, steeper ascents and different weather and scenery.
So was it roughly 20 miles a day you were doing?
I started off, I wasn't sure whether I'd do it in what sort of length of time, really. I had a week, and I was thinking, well, if I managed to do it in 5 days, I'd got a day for Ben Nevis, which is been an ambition of mine. Most people seem to do it in between 6 and 8, I think. I think if you do it in 5 days, you do need to cover your 20 miles a day.
Right, and so to do that, then, did you find that you were up early and finishing late? I mean, give us an idea of sort of how long it took you.
Yeah, I mean, I think with any good walking, the sooner you get up and go, the better, really. It gives you the time. And, of course, the daylight was there, which was great. So I tended to be up and out between 7 and 8 and walking by then, which was lovely because you get that early morning freshness of the whole scene.
And then you sort of finish what time?
Well, again, depending on the length of day or finding a campsite or where I was headed or how I was feeling even, I think the earliest I stopped was probably 4 or 5, and the latest was probably 6, maybe 7.
And did you feel, I mean, you were carrying your own equipment and in a 45-litre bag, we'll come on to that later, but for what you were carrying and obviously you carried all your food and that sort of stuff, did you feel exhausted by the end of the day when you'd done your 20-odd miles?
Yeah, I think it probably worked, quite hard through the time, and I was very grateful I took poles. I was surprised how many people I saw walking without poles, carrying a pack. For me, I don't think I could have done it, certainly in the 5 days, without the use of poles.
And talking of the other walkers, were they, carrying all their own equipment, or were they walkers and their baggage were being moved for them?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one of the appeals of the West Highland Way for a lot of people is there is a baggage transfer system, or several, that you can use on the West Highland Way. So quite a few people were taking advantage of that and just walking with day packs. And obviously the courier drops their packs at the appropriate B&Bs or campsites. I probably only saw a couple of people who were carrying all their stuff and camping. I did on the first day come across a father and son. I think they were Dutch, and honestly they looked like they had the whole house, and they arrived on the same campsite as myself about an hour and a half after I passed them. And when they put the tent up, I was just amazed. It was like a huge car camping tent, and he had the frying pan at the bottom of the pack and everything. I was thinking, my goodness, it will take you a long time to do this West Highland Way if you're... they were just walking so slowly and no poles because of the weight they were carrying.
Future converts, I'm sure. So come back to the actual days involved. Can you break it down into day by day and just sort of give a description of what the terrain was like, and if it was easy walking, and what people can expect if they were to do this as they slowly move away from the start?
Certainly. I mean, it starts off out in Mulgai, sort of the back of supermarkets and odd industrial places, but very quickly you're out into open fields. It takes advantage of a disused railway line, for example, and odd bits of common land and climbing through farmland as well. There's quite a lot of lambing area by Dryman. The weather the first day was fine to start with, and heavy rain by the afternoon. And I walked from Mulgai to just past Balmahar. There's a camping and caravan site there, which I stayed overnight at. And the first night was incredibly cold, very, very cold.
You're listening to the outdoorstation.co.uk.
Award-winning producers of podcasts to inform, inspire, entertain, and encourage people to enjoy a healthy outdoors lifestyle.
If you have any feedback, questions or suggestions, why not drop us a line directly to our email address, info@theoutdoorstation.co.uk.
Was the campsite a luxury campsite? Was it well featured? Was it rewarding to get there?
Well, I was pleased to get there. There was a nice pitch for tents, and the owners were very welcoming. And there was a purpose block for campers, so there was somewhere I could go and cook, for example, and there was showers and so forth. So, that was great. Had a chat there with a chap who was doing a lot of cycle touring, and had to talk to him about what he was doing and where he was going, which was interesting to catch up with.
And was there a pub and that sort of thing if you wanted to take it a bit easier?
No, nothing no close.
Luxury.
No, yeah, back at Balmahar, there was some accommodation, but Dryman was probably the larger settlement if you were going to, want to eat overnight or stop.
So after a cold night, then you obviously were probably up and out fairly early that day, I should imagine.
Yeah, it was really frosty actually, and a lot of condensation in the tent. So set off quite early and stopped couple of hours later for a brew in a forest to air the tent a bit and dry it off, and then carried on and hit Loch Lomond, which a lot of people find this section the most strenuous. It's day 3 for a lot of people, and it was actually a very rocky up and down, and actually the people I met who had got lost on the West Highland Way got lost on this section. There were places where I had to squeeze through with my pack, and definitely climbing up and over boulders and down by the shoreline and up again, and not a straightforward path at all.
So it was a fairly meandering path at that point, was it?
Yeah, very pretty, but quite hard work, and it was probably the nicest day of the whole walk. It was a really nice, beautiful sunny day, and actually it was quite tiring. That was the day I finished early. I found a fantastic wild camping site at the end of the loch. It was outside. They have a restriction now on wild camping along Loch Lomond.
Yeah, no, I need to explain this a bit, because this is sort of come in over the last few years now. It's now 2013 as we record this, and I think there's a bit of confusion about where you can camp, wild camp, and where you can't, because people obviously been abusing it from certain areas along Loch Lomond. So is there any way you can sort of make that easy?
Well, it's actually very clear there. I mean, there's no camping from March through to October on certain sections, the lower sections of the Loch Lomond. And actually, there's not a lot of camping sites that you can use. But it is apparently because it was totally abused. And actually, I spoke to some walkers later on who'd done the West Highland Way about 5 or 6 years ago and said it was so much better now, that when they'd walked it, it had been appalling with the rubbish and beer cans and diesel in the water and so forth. They said it was, dreadful, and actually how much better it was.
So the second day, then you're down by Loch Lomond. You're obviously scrambling through rocks and over bits and bobs, which is any sort of lochside path can take, and obviously a bit more challenging. But did it stay along the side there, or did it leave the loch side at all and head up into the higher ground?
There is a section actually where the path divides, and on the Harvey's map it's very clear there's a lower and a higher path. I had decided I'd probably take the upper path and hadn't realised when it had split, so automatically followed it. So I don't know, for whatever reason. But it was, that section was slightly easier. It was through forest and woods. I believe the lower section was probably still quite scrambly.
Yeah. And now coming on to the wild camp, because that was I think it was that the only night you wild camped along the whole length?
Well, I wild camped too, sort of by Bridge of Orkney, but down by the hotel on the river there. So
okay,
it was.
We'll come back to this one though. How did it feel as compared to wild camping that you'd done before with me in Scotland doing the TGO?
Well, it was a tiring day, so I stopped earlier than I would have, partly because I saw this fantastic spot down by the end of the loch, out of the restricted zone, obviously, and went to set the tent up. And obviously I found actually a couple of pegs from other tents, so I knew I wasn't the only one who'd appreciated the spot. Although it was remote, I mean, the next morning I probably walked about 2 hours before I got to Blainglass campsite. It was, I could still see in the distance or hear cars in the distance, which a lot of wild camping we've done on the TGOC, sometimes you can't hear cars at all, and you're actually hours and hours from civilization, as it were. So there was a touch of it. But having said that, it was still very remote. I think some walkers came by about 7 o'clock, and after that there was no one. Herd of deer came, but apart from that, it was just beautiful.
And how did you feel as a solo female walker? Because this is another question that a few people have since talked to you about, I know, about how vulnerable they would feel as a female walker. Did you feel particularly concerned?
No, not really. I mean, somebody had asked me that, and I said, actually, often you're probably more vulnerable in suburbia, or where there's lots of people. It would take a lot of effort for someone to walk out to, and then to walk back out again. If anyone was thinking of harming you in any shape or form. I mean, I think you could let your imagination run wild with you, but it's such a peaceful place, and I was so tired anyway. It was fine.
Presumably after a good night's sleep then at the wild camp, you must have set off fairly early.
Yeah, set off quite early, had some muesli and left. I was just above, there's an island of Vow in the Loch Lomond, and I was probably about half a mile from Doon, which is a bothy, which is on the trail. And I walked past there first thing and got to Blainglass campsite, Blainglass farm. They've got all along the trail, actually, a lot of the campsites now have pods or hobbit homes or little wooden chalet type things. Okay. They seem very popular.
For glamping?
Yeah, sort of type of glamping, yeah.
Could you actually do it then, the whole length, with doing this pods business?
Yeah, we probably could, actually. Yeah, probably could. In fact, chatting to somebody, they were saying they love them because it's not as expensive as bed and breakfast. It's a bit more than camping. It's sort of that midway point, and especially if you're sharing with a mate, £30 a night for a little pod for two of you. Is not too bad, £15 each.
I suppose so. It saves taking the tent, doesn't it?
A bit more privacy than a bunkhouse.
Yeah. Sorry, so carry on then.
Yeah, so had a fantastic cooked breakfast there, which is, I suppose, about 9 o'clock. I think I started walking about 7, got there about 9. And then I walked on to... there's a division in the trail, so you get to Crinlarrick. And you can either go down into Crinlarrick, where there's lots of bed and breakfasts, places to eat, there's food, shops, etc. Or you can carry on the trail to Tideham. and I decided rather than deviate, I had sufficient food and nibbles to keep me going, so I carried on to
Let's be fair, you're not really a big cooked breakfast sort of person, so you must have been really hungry when you tucked into that and you cleaned the plate, no doubt.
Yeah, well, it kept me going, that's for sure. So I carried on to Tideham, and I think I got to there about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Apparently, it didn't used to be much of a place, but since the West Highland Way, it's actually grown quite a lot. There's a big place called the Green Welly Shop, which is it seemed almost like, to be honest, a glorified, like nurseries, where they have shops and they're extended. They sell all sorts of bits and pieces. There's a bit of an outdoor shop there as well, and there's a big cafeteria. But there were quite a few other little bits and pieces of shops. Anyway, I called in at the spa and bought a couple of items, and the lady there said, "Oh, where are you heading?" I said, "Oh, Bridge of Orchid." And I said, "How long?" She said, "Oh, about 3 hours." And it was quite straightforward. It's a military road from there. So I think I probably got there about 3. I thought, I should be Bridge of Orchid by about 6, I think. And actually, it only took me about 2.5 hours. And I met up with a couple of guys who were walking and had a really good chat to them. And that sort of made the time pass quite quickly. So got to Bridge of Orchid about 6 o'clock. And I thought there was a campsite there, foolishly, but there wasn't. So just did a wild campsite down from the hotel. On the riverbank, raining, unfortunately. So I did treat myself to a bowl of chips and a half a beer.
Oh, I didn't know about this cooked food for a whole day. So much for dried rations.
Yeah, well, the rest of it was. But I think I deserved it.
It sounds like. What was it like underfoot? I mean, the military road on the Corrie Pass is fairly stony. For example, is this better underfoot?
Yeah, that one actually wasn't too bad. There was a bit up and down and rocky, and after that it was fairly straightforward. Nice and straightforward going, really. Not too undulating. So yeah, that was absolutely fine.
What it would be, I suppose, a cooked breakfast and a night in the pub and a bag of chips.
Well, you know me, easy.
You're a cheap date, aren't you?
I think the guys were a bit shocked actually I was walking because they were having the bags carried for them, and the one guy did make me smile. Phil, he was saying that he wanted to make sure he got to Kinloch Leven the next day, which is he thought that was a really big stretch. So he was saying, well, perhaps I'll walk an extra couple of miles tonight and then get taxi back, because he had to do it all, and then get taxi out to where he finished the night before to carry on. I was going, excuse me, I'm carrying all my food, all my pack, I'm half your size, and I'm wild camping tonight. And you're going and having a nice meal and a shower and a hot bath. And you're still thinking, and his mate said, she's right. So,
you obviously made a name for yourself in a very short period of time then.
It just tickled me a bit.
Would you class that as a wild camp then? That's that
well,
one?
I mean, there aren't any facilities. I mean, interestingly, there was a couple of the hotels. There was one further on, I've forgotten which one it was, where you designated you can camp there. They're happy for you to do a wild camp overnight, but they don't want you to use their facilities in the morning. There's actually notices up saying that, which I think is a bit hard. Even if you bought, they said even if you bought food the night before, you can't use the facilities in the morning. I have to say, the Bridge of Orchid, they were lovely. They were very welcoming, and I did use their facilities in the morning. There doesn't seem to be any problem with that.
Just a thought, as an aside here, for people looking at doing this, what about fuel, gas and meths if you needed something along the way? Would you think that shop would have stocked camping gas?
The one at Tideham? Yeah, I think it probably would have. I mean, it was quite extensive. You probably could have got gas there.
And what about meths, do you think?
Don't know. The spa shops, there's a few spa shops. Do they sell meths?
Occasionally, perhaps. Anyway, let's move on. After a boozy night in the pub and a sleep by the river, where do we go the following day?
The next day is quite a long one. I was a little concerned because it's across Rannoch Moor. So I wasn't sure.
Now, describe that to people as well,
Rannoch Moor. Well, Rannoch Moor, it's bleak, basically. There's actually, I read the Cicerone guide for the West Highland Way, and in that they sort of say, don't underestimate, this is the furthest you'll probably be on the trail from civilization, and in bad weather, you do need to be prepared, sort of thing. So I was thinking, oh gosh. So I set off fairly early, and there's a sort of a path up and over the hill and down to Inversnaid. Or is it even Invereron? One of the two, I get those confused. Anyway, and with a hotel there, and just past the hotel you begin on the military way. And there were quite a few information boards up, which was quite interesting. They're obviously making a lot more of the heritage of Scotland, and those were in several places along the West Highland Way, explaining a little bit about the history or how things have originated. King's House, for example, there was another one there explaining that had been on the Drovers Road, and they'd had to pay somebody to actually keep the inn there because it was such a godforsaken place. Yes.
Yeah. So is it like a sort of sandy Land Rover track, or is it muddy Land Rover track? Stony? Give us an idea.
Funny enough, when I got to the start of where the military the path joins the military road, there was this big information road saying, why they'd made them and how they'd made them. Although they're called military roads, originally it was to move military, but also used by carriages and to access the Highlands. And obviously the cattle, they didn't want them damaged, so or the carriages wheels broken, so they were sort of gravel and then cobblestones on the top. So quite hard to walk on, actually. I find them quite hard to walk on, but obviously they've deteriorated over the years, so actually it's easier where they've deteriorated a bit, to be honest.
And the moor itself, presumably, was sort of low gorse and heather.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty bleak. There's it's fairly open to the elements. My fear was about becoming disorientated, but actually the military road is so clear, you just follow the road basically.
Right. And if you had to wild camp there, is there enough space to do that anywhere?
You'd have to pick your spot. There wouldn't be many. It's pretty bleak, and it's that sort of close heather dense stuff that it wouldn't be easy to find a pitch. Quite a few big rivers and nice bridges over them, quite picturesque. We had pouring rain, and I had pouring rain and wind. This is the sort of thing you like on open bleak military roads. But I was quite pleased. It's a bit like the Burma Road, what we call the Burma Road. You can just see it going on in the distance and thinking, oh crikey, that's where I'm headed. But sort of once you get up and over the last ridge, then you're back down into Glencoe. And I walked down, and it was one of those paths where there's a sign saying Mountain Cafe, go this way, and this little road deviating. They show you that you can go back onto the West Highland Way, so it sort of allies your fears that you'll get lost and not be able to find it again. Okay. But then you sort of set off on it, because I was really hungry by this time, thinking, oh, cafe, that sounds fantastic. And then you're sort of going off thinking, well, where am I going? And you seem to be going nowhere, and then suddenly there's a great big the lodge for Glencoe for the skiing and the ski lifts and all the rest of it, and you're suddenly in big pine cabins and things. And I was quite pretty tired then, so I did stop for about an hour and had a couple of cups of tea and a baked potato, I think, and then potted on again.
Podcasting around the world. It's all about getting out and having much more fun.
This is the Outdoor Station.
The track was fairly undulating across the right moor then, and then was there a bit of a climb then as you started to go towards Glencoe, or what was the terrain like?
Well, you're fairly high anyway. You sort of hit the I think it's the A82, that main one that goes through the Highlands, and the next bit of the way follows that to a certain extent, as it meanders down the floor of the valley before you then climb up the Devil's Staircase and across the top and down into Kinlochleven.
Right, okay, which is a path we've actually done ourselves before on the TGO, wasn't it?
I remembered doing that, actually.
Yeah, and again, that was fairly easy going, just laborious, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the climb is just steady. You just have to pace yourself and go up, and then you come down, and Kinlochleven's one of those places you think you're almost there, and actually it takes a long time to get into. I
seem to remember there was a lot of, as you came down the path, there was a lot of switchbacks going through trees, and you, as you said, you sort of, well, we must be there yet, and it still keeps going right down into the valley where the river is, isn't there? Where there's some sort of old power station.
The old
pump, was it water pump?
Reservoir pipes. The great big reservoir pipes are there, and go down through, and then down into Kinlochleven. Apparently, Kinlochleven was famous for smelting aluminium, and that's originally where it became, quite industrial.
Well, I remember there was a few shops there, but also when we were there last time, there was a campsite right on the path there as you come down. But somebody else pointed out, I think it was Andy Howell, pointed out there was another campsite just over the bridge, which I think is the one you headed for.
Yeah, McDonald's Hotel, and that's quite well set up. Again, you've got those little cabins and a small patch, but beautiful setting by the loch there. And I was the only one there, actually, and they're really accommodating. They put the drying room on for me, and, the showers were there, and there's reasonable food that you can buy if you want to, and there's a little pot wash room. So,
And I think Kinloch Lever's got a camping shop as well, so if you were stuck for gas, I think that you'd be able to pick some stuff up there. But was that a better campsite than the one down by the riverside?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when we stayed there before, it was a very flat pitch, but it was really stony to get your pegs into, I seem to remember. And again, there was nobody camping there when I went through, but there's a hostel there as well.
Right. So another restful night, I presume, then, when you had a reasonable campsite, and on to... Was this the last day now you're coming on to?
Yeah, last day was Kinloch Leven through to Fort William, which I think most people do as a final day, which was, a shorter day for me. It was about 15 miles, so... it was a bit shorter. And again, very straightforward. Some of it was on Military Road. A few places, again, I had a wind down the valleys, which was hard work. And a couple of places I thought, I'll be in the trees soon. And actually, they deforested it, so the forest wasn't there,
Okay.
which was disappointing. And also some interesting ruins. A couple of places. There's one very gaunt frame of old stone houses, which must have been some cottages of some sort. And looking at it, it was a beautiful place, but it would have been, such a hard life to have lived there. Really tough. Miles from anywhere.
And so getting to Fort William, do you sort of see it for some distance off? Do you sort of get that downhill feeling at any stage?
Yeah, again, it took quite a while to get into. You come down through the forestry paths, and you actually come out by the Ben Nevis Visitor Centre. And then there's a walk along the road, a couple of miles actually, into Fort William.
Oh, really?
And the actual finish line they have is right at the end of the high street. I think they make you wobble all the way up the high street. Someone said, it's the high street wobble. You have to get all the way to the end. And there's a bench there with a chap rubbing his feet, a statue which you can have your photo taken with. And on the floor there's quite a nice map of the West Highland Way. I asked a policeman who was stood there to take a photo of me. He sat there. So that was quite good. And then went off and I treated myself it was my birthday as well. So finished the West Highland Way and it was my birthday. So I treated myself to a night in the B&B.
Good for you. And obviously you're at the base of Ben Nevis then, should you wish to tackle it. And we'll just touch on that briefly because you did have a go at that.
Yeah. The next day, because I'd done it in the 5 days, I had a spare day before my train left on the Wednesday. So walked a couple of miles back out to the visitor centre. Nice walking around my pack for the day. That was quite good. And I was very impressed actually with the visitor centre. I sort of chatted to the guys there and sort of said, what's it looking like today? And very thorough. Sort of said, if you want to go to the tops today, you'll need crampons, compass, map. And I said, well, I've got map and compass, but not crampons. So I probably wasn't thinking of attempting the top anyway. But I sort of said, look, this is a circular walk I'd sort of planned, and how would this appear? And he said, yeah, that would be fine, actually. Just watch your steps here and here. It'd be boggy here. And they had photos, which I thought was quite good. They sort of had the map to talk you through, and they said, when you get here, expect this, you should see this. So, if you're a visual learner, etc., you could see, right, after about an hour I should see this, and how they described it's strenuous, or you need a lot of energy for this part, or watch the wind or hit you here. And I thought they were very thorough, for people. Obviously there's been some accidents up there and all the rest of it.
And they asked your experiences course as well and everything else, I presume?
Well, I sort of said, I'd just done the West Highland Way. He said, yes, but you don't really need a map for that. I said, yes, but I have got a compass and I can, which was quite a laugh. Anyway, I went up. I'd not been up Ben Nevis at all before, so went up the main paths, and it is quite strenuous. And it is a different beast. You are on that sort of next level of scale of hills, I suppose, and got up not quite halfway, or just about halfway. There's a loch, and there the mountain actually plateaus out a bit. And even there, I mean, I'd watched a group of, it looked like army folk actually go along the path to go to the top and actually turn back, because there was still a lot of snow and ice on the form. And of course there's cliffs, so you don't want to miss your footing or miss the path at that section. But even then, there was a couple of guys who got up. They'd been sheltering and obviously stopped for a break and carried on up. And the one was wearing jeans, not suitable footwear in any shape or form, and had just a buff pulled over his head, so no suitable headwear either. And they were going to the top. I mean, crazy, just crazy. And I headed off on my circular titch, the bit where he said it was quite boggy. He wasn't joking. It was a bit like the peat hags on the Monolea. Right. But I sort of, bit concerned that I'd lost the path, and, I didn't really want to do that on Ben Nevis, but saw some cairns and followed my way around, and I went round through to the mountain rescue hut, which is long. But by then I'd had sleet and snow and, hard wind, and so I was quite glad to cross the stream at the bottom and then walk down the valley on the other side and back down to suburbia. Yeah.
Well done. But I mean, a magnificent countryside, I should imagine. Beautiful, powerful, statuesque mountain.
Yeah, and at Glencoe they were still skiing. There's still plenty of snow up in the fields. Wow. Yeah, so plenty of snow still.
So much for spring. Okay, well, let's just very briefly then just touch on equipment, because that's always useful for people to know. But before we do, how would you generalise it? Would you say that it was just the West Highland Way itself, easy walking, got to reasonably fit, got to be very fit to do it, especially in 5 days, whatever? How would you, if you were carrying everything as opposed to the people that are having things shuttled for them?
I think, again, you could take it in stages, because there's more facilities along the way. You could stop and buy chocolate bars or a cup of tea if you planned it. You can take as long or as short as you like, so it would be doable for most people, I would have thought. Although I do think there are sections of it, like along Loch Lomond, where it's pretty rocky and you would need some help. If you were not particularly able, you might struggle.
Well, with over the stones and rocks and that. Okay. So equipment-wise, what pack did you have?
I had one of the new women ladies 45 Lightning packs, which is on its smallest setting for me. It was fine. I had a week's worth of food in there initially, so I missed not having an external pocket for my waterproofs, to be honest. So I did have a dry bag, which I just put across the top with my waterproofs in, which a lot of the time actually I wore. And obviously as I ate through my food, it then went inside the bag anyway. But yeah, and what I took for the West Highland Way, I probably would have taken what you take for 1 week. You really would take the same for 2 weeks, except the amount of food.
Yeah, so pretty much the same as you would do on the TGO or something similar. So that was the Exped Lightning, and that carried okay?
Yeah, no, it was fine actually. It was fine, okay.
And then, obviously, if you're doing the same sort of equipment that you would do for TGOing, cook gear. Let's just look at cooking and then sleeping.
Cooking, I took our titanium honey stove and the Avenue burner and meths. I did light the honey stove with wood at the loch side, the wild camp there, but the rest of the time I used meths.
And you came back with half a bottle?
I did, but I mean, it reminded me too, that first morning when it was really cold, I really struggled to get the meths lit until I remembered to warm it up. But otherwise, it worked really well. And a couple of times, like I stopped in the forest for a brew, and I just used the little Avenue burner with the trivet on top, and stuck a Avenue cup straight on it with some water and made a brew.
Oh, nice and simple. So that was the titanium honey stove. And the sleeping gear?
I've got a Rab 400, which I love, sleeping bag and a silk liner. The first night I actually wore my down jacket and some prison pants and a silk nightie inside the bag because I was so cold. It was a really cold night. And I had the Peak Elite, the women's version Peak Elite, as a sleeping mat.
Now, you just mentioned the prison pants. Normally, you I think most people will know roughly what we take, and you take possibly when you're doing a walk like this, change your clothes and the usual sort of stuff. But I had suggested you use the prison pants because I know that you get quite cold as soon as you stop when you stop walking. Did taking some insulated clothing for the tent make much of a difference?
It did for me. I mean, I didn't have you there as my hot water bottle, so I was pleased you suggested the prison pants, actually, and it was the men's small size, and they did actually fit. I thought they'd be too big, but they were fine. And that one night I wore them in the sleeping bag. I mean, other than that, what I tended to do is when I got to camp, I pitched a tent, obviously, and then put my down stuff on pretty quick, and the prison pants, just to keep warm until I went to bed, because if you get into your sleeping bag cold, it takes an awful long time to heat up, whereas if you get in warm, which I would be from my down and my prison pants, then obviously you're warm to start with to sleep.
Right, that makes all the difference. So apart from the sort of usual one wet, one dry sort of clothing, was there anything else that you took, or luxury items?
Took a book. A couple of new pieces of equipment. I've always really stuck with my Montaigne Terra pants because I love them. But it was suggested I try the Helix ladies pants, and they were superb. I really enjoyed those. A nice bit of stretch from Rab. Yeah. Rab are really nice, and they also tried their vaporized jacket, which was a soft shell, and I was never quite sure with soft shell, but I actually used it instead of a fleece, and it's quite nice because obviously it's a wind stopper as well. So a couple of the mornings when it was really cold, I set off at 7. I wore that, and it was just the right temperature to keep the wind off and keep you warm while you got going.
Okay, and would you say there was anything that you felt you should have taken that you missed, or that you'd like to have taken?
Velcro straps. I should have taken some of our Velcro straps just to attach things, or it just would have been useful, I think, to have had that, and maybe a bit of a windshield material which I hadn't taken would have been useful. When I just had, if I just lit the Avenue and the Trivet, a little bit of windshield would have helped. Other than that, the Mountain King poles were fantastic. Couldn't have done the trip without them. And I used the Vaudo Power Lizard, which is a lovely tent and very easy and very light and compact. It's actually quite palatial for me on my own.
You're tiny inside it. So what would you say to anybody listening to this that sort of fancies giving this a go? Would you say there was a certain time of year that would be better than most? What would you recommend or suggest with this experience under your hat now as being a good time of year to approach it?
I think probably pre-Midge. I did talk to a couple of people who I met, a chap who came and did sections of it on a regular basis, and he was a teacher, so he said he did a lot of his in the summer, and he said, 1, it's very crowded, and 2, there's a lot of midges and he gets eaten alive. So I think pre-Midge was quite good. There is an area around Conic Hill where you have to avoid when there's lambings if you've got a dog with you, but otherwise and as I say, the motocross in the first week of May, but it was quite nice, and if you're a social person, then a lot of people like doing it because they meet people on the way. I think because I set off early, and also because I perhaps was on my own, I didn't talk to that many people on the way or see that many people. So overall I was quite pleased. I didn't get lost. I could look after myself, and all the things that I'd learnt previously, when we've been out, came to the fore, and I was quite pleased with my effort, I suppose. I don't know that I'll do a trip on my own again. I think it's definitely more enjoyable when it's, you can share it with someone. But really pleased to have done it.
There's plenty of information online about the West Highland Way. However, I thought it would be useful to add Rose's recent experience to that, as many listeners have told me they need time to build up their confidence before undertaking a longer walk, and these podcasts help in a big way to convince people that they can actually do it. Now, regular listeners will know there's been some long gaps recently in the podcasts, and I've had a few emails asking me why. Well, it's been information I couldn't release until now, but I can update everyone that our online shop, which is backpackinglight.co.uk, is moving at the beginning of June to new, larger premises. And currently building work, paperwork, storage racks and numerous other activities have been taking place to get the unit ready for my return after the end of the TGO Challenge this year. So once that move is complete, I shall hopefully have a dedicated studio left behind so I can produce more media all related to our favourite subject and hopefully be making up for all that lost time and big gaps. So that's my news. Wish me luck on the TGO Challenge. I don't know if I'll be doing a sort of a full diary podcast like before, but I certainly will be taking the equipment with me and recording interviews with interesting characters along the way. So until next time, take care out there, enjoy this fine weather, and if you're going on the TGO Challenge, I'll see you up there. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear more from our extensive free library, please visit the website at theoutdoorstation.co.uk, the home of UK-based audio and video podcasts for outdoors people everywhere.